Hello, my name is Emmanuel, but others call me Breadman. This video is intended to dive into my work, where it all comes from in terms of inspiration, and how I came to do what I do now. There are many different branches to my tree of work, so I won't be able to fit it all into this video, nor is all of it entirely relevant to the grand narrative. So I'll be focusing on covering inspirations and personal works which contribute to the grand narrative and just the general direction of my work. As of making this docu-interview style video, I am 22 and I have been making things in general since before reaching my first birthday. My mind has been wired for creativity from the onset, with plenty of inspiration out there to guide me in the direction I've taken with my art. The final result of all of this inspiration is a mind focused purely on creativity, expanding my skill set each and every day to satiate the cacophony of images, sounds, characters, settings and locations, and ideas in general, which flood my mind multiple times over within the span of every second of my waking life. The very first fixations I had growing up were always on what I would call the eccentric side. I found myself deeply obsessed with any piece of childhood media that contained a catalogue of creatures, a catalogue of multicolored characters who all matched a certain aesthetic, such as Transformers, or Power Rangers, or Thomas the Tank Engine, that all had a central character design which could be stretched in any direction. I really liked the variation of it all. I really loved how it all formed this singular roster of characters that all felt like one hive organism rather than an individual favorite. Essentially, I was drawn to anything that allowed me to express different personalities through the visual language of physical appearance. I would say the first example of me becoming obsessed with exploring the infinite possibilities for personality in the universe, explored through physical form of a character or creature, I would say the first example would be nature documentaries, especially prehistoric ones, such as Walking with Dinosaurs, Walking with Beasts, or Walking with Monsters, which was my personal favorite growing up. These documentaries set the tone perfectly and were very educational. I would watch them over and over and over again just to really feel like I was there, just to see all the different creatures. It was one of the only creative outlets I had for exploring nature in general and all of the possibilities within it. Later on in my teen years, I actually ended up happening upon a creative outlet for this, known as speculative evolution, a type of project where someone creates their own world complete with its own scientifically plausible species and climate, which drew me in immediately. I discovered the bird world of Serena, a world seeded with small canaries, some fish, and some insects, and then the story details how those all evolve over time, with some absolutely stunning concepts seen throughout. Another one would be the alien world of Darwin 5, or was it Darwin 4? I don't remember. It was a brilliant documentary, fully CGI, fully explaining alien life on another planet, how some of it might look, how some of it might behave. I think the final example which inspired me most was C.M. Koseman and his brilliant series All Tomorrows, which explored a strange timeline where an alien race known as the Q comes and messes up everything for humanity, distorting them biologically into a range of different forms. As I've always had a love for body horror and nature and all of its possibilities, as previously stated, having these two combine was just a huge Kickstarter for me in terms of getting some ideas flowing. I think the reason I have loved these nature documentaries growing up is because they presented a familiar world with unfamiliar creatures that somewhat resemble things that I knew about growing up on Earth, except it was some sort of distorted otherworldly version of it. It was like nature, something recognizable, but on the other side. I think that's what really kickstarted my love for all things otherworldly, strange, on the weird side, from the other side of the line, to put it. Because of this love for all things weird and on the other side, things that pushed boundaries, I ended up gravitating towards any series or cartoon that carried these sort of themes. The first brilliant example of this is Trapdoor, a wonderful stop-motion series from the 80s which depicted countless colourful yet eerie creatures and set designs, as well as its sister series, Stop It and Tidy Up, which had its own fair share of weird-looking characters. Both of these cartoons set a concrete standard for me in terms of what I would be drawn to for the rest of my days, gravitating towards cartoons that genuinely made an effort to care about going the extra mile, not conforming to being cute and digestible. From that point forward, I was drawn to anything weird, especially creatures which were strange and colourful in design, not necessarily just being realistic animals. The first example of me becoming obsessed with another world that wasn't necessarily animal-like or a cartoon in that sort of sense that Trapdoor was. The first example was actually the Subspace Emissary adventure mode from Super Smash Bros. Brawl, where the realm known as Subspace and all that lives inside it had been brought into the world of the main characters. The in-game enemies in this adventure mode were not from any game franchise within the Smash Bros. Brawl roster, rather they were unique creations made for that mode. Their weirdness and strange designs had no bearing on the story, they were simply there to be mysterious, sent to plague the land by a dark force known as Taboo. These creatures were not just animals or beings, but designed, originating from another realm, from a higher power. For me, they sit in the same ballpark as demons and angels from the days of old, such as ones that resembled familiar things but were in fact not the authentic real deal, rather a distorted version of our reality with higher origins. Most importantly, they were from another world, with their designs emphasizing this outlandish nature. In a sense, it felt like a child's version of having a catalogue of the demons, the old demons from the Bible, which were quite strange and referenced a lot of real-life imagery from our world. This interest of mine would eventually solidify and become more nuanced after discovering Evangelion, which contains strange otherworldly attackers known as angels, with abstract forms that barely resembled a living creature, but were indeed alive. Moreover, they were biblical in nature, hailing from some sort of higher realm, not strictly an animal, but a being with some sort of designed purpose to it. Because of my religious upbringing, these angels endowed with their otherworldly intentions, powers and origins spoke to me, scratched an itch I hadn't had in years, especially due to how it was all presented from the perspective of a secret government organization fighting against and attempting to understand the angels using whatever technology they had as fragile humans. This reminded me a lot of another series that I had adored in my teen years, known as the SCP Foundation. The SCP Foundation project became infused into my love of creatures. I was fascinated by the idea of these anomalous creatures and beings which were being catalogued and written about from the perspective of a secret formal organization akin to the CIA or MI5. I was intrigued seeing such fragile and ignorant beings such as humans attempting to understand these anomalous beings. The project does not provide any answers to where these oddities hail from, but rather it just describes them and their behaviors, how they work, and how you might picture an encounter with them, leaving the viewer to sit on everything. Really, really driving their imagination wild. I remember the literal day that it all started. One day, I happened upon Lord Bung's series known as Confinement, which actually takes place in the aforementioned SCP series. The opening animation features a strange silhouette right there for only a few seconds, but it was that was the catalyst needed to start the chain reaction of solidifying all the ideas I'd had over the years. This diamond-headed silhouette with its glowing diamond eye had awakened something within me. I must have drawn that same concept over and over, tracing over references of humans, animals, and machinery, while still adding tons of my own details so that it wasn't just purely shameless tracing. I tried all sorts of things to expand upon this diamond-eyed concept, which began to lead me to all sorts of different territories, including this one, which has become sort of well known in the online world as my stand-in or mascot. When creating a creature library of your own this large, you eventually encounter the golden question. What world do these creatures come from? How does this world work? What is the intention behind them coming here, and what do they want with us? How does their biology function? What is the hierarchy like? There are so many questions to be answered, and from there I started actually trying to build some sort of narrative as to what I was doing. I started taking whatever photos I could in interesting areas, developing a love for photography, as well as finding whatever images I could online, so that I could fill them with my creatures and create a rough sort of world built up of all of the encounter images that I'd made. I began to take notes on what Trevor Henderson was doing. He was doing something very similar to me, except of professional quality and with a lot of coherence to it. I began to take notes on how he presented his work, how he illustrated his monsters, and just generally the types of stories he would tell with these monsters. His work showed me that what I was doing had potential. I just needed to raise the quality and make it more coherent, and develop my ideas further. From there, I went in my own direction, combining my love for strange experimental games and aesthetics into the mix, such as games like the LSD Dream Emulator, a psychedelic game for the PS1 which explored a colourful dream realm based off the creator's own dream journal. My second example would be Off and Earthbound, two incredibly out there RPGs, which broke a lot of new ground in terms of sporting a unique visual landscape of their own. With these in mind, I began working on a weird analog horror project known as Perinal, which was less about horror and more so about the human condition and the infrastructure of the human mind. This series garnered a strong niche following, for which I must say I am truly grateful for, as that love and support has shown me that what I'm making indeed has a right to exist, and that I should keep going. Fast forward to the modern day, and it was inevitable that I would one day find a professional analog horror project which piqued my interest. And sure enough, one certainly did. Gemini Home Entertainment highlighted the use of video and text alongside these paranormal found footage artworks similar to Trevor Henderson. My mind was a whirlwind with inspiration after watching this. The combination of the visuals, the music, the text, and the false sense of security, all of this was embedded into a piece of media that would string along the viewer with a safe and educational instructional video, which can quickly turn dark as paranormal elements are introduced, breaking the audience's false sense of security. I must have dreamt up a million ideas for how I could begin putting my own spin on this concept. In 2021, I embarked on my journey with the Educational Tape series, making strange one-off ARG-style videos until it clicked that I could merge the educational and speculative evolution aspects with the horror and the world building and the analog horror. Everything. From there, I focused on a few different concepts and themes for each tape, which consisted of presentation-style documentaries which covered parts of my world. I focused on the key interest at first, illustrating and describing different emotions, moving on to otherworldly creatures reminiscent of Evangelion and SCP, which sported abstract designs and strange powers. From there, I now sit upon the world-building project known as Perinal, which started off as a fun little project during lockdown when I was bored, but eventually became something larger with a loving community around it, which I am forever grateful for. Much love to everyone.